Hi, I'm Coach Matt Mikolajczyk, and I'm a sports performance intern coach at Marquette University in the spring semester of 2023, and I'm going to be presenting on an annual periodized plan for the sport of Pesapallo. So I were to open it up to you guys and ask, with the sport of baseball, if you had to critique it. I know a lot of people love it, it's America's pastime, but if you had to be critical of the sport and be brutally honest, what would you say you don't like about it?
Too much standing, too slow.
Too slow, too much standing. Anything else? Well, those are really common answers. So a lot of people think it's too long, the games are too slow, and there's not enough action. These are the exact critiques that a Finnish track and field athlete had when he visited America in the early 1900s and he viewed a game of baseball. And so he thought to himself, we can do better. And so Pesapallo was his answer, which is very fast-paced and very action-packed. So here's a quick clip of the sport so we can get a feel for it. All right, we're going to skip the clip. We'll just talk about dissimilarities to the sport of baseball. First is the base path. So home plate to first base is about 25 yards, but it gets progressively longer as we move base to base, whereas third base to home is closer to 50 yards. Pitching is going to be straight up in the air, so the pitcher stands right next to the home plate and has to throw it a meter above his head, and then the batter goes from there. So with batting, there's going to be very few misses and very few strikeouts, as it's very easy to hit that ball. So fielders have to be ready all the time. And then foul balls are any time the ball is knocked outside of the area of play before it hits inside the area of play. So sheer power alone is not going to be that much of an advantage to a batter. And then lastly, players. Most of these players are not full-time athletes. They're going to have part-time or full-time jobs outside of the sport of Pesapallo, so we have to take this into consideration when we program for them. Then competition schedule, the Premier League in Finland is going to be the Super Pesas League, and this is going to last from about April to August, and then the competition or the championship schedule is going to last till September. So 44 matches total. Some of the movements we're going to see very often are swinging, sprinting, a lot of linear acceleration to the bases, as well as out in the field with the fielders trying to react on the ball. Throwing, of course, as you have to throw the ball to the base before the player gets there to get them out. And a lot of explosive change of direction in the frontal plane. As you see here, players are already reacting before the ball is hit to try and make a play on that ball. And then lastly, sliding and diving into bases before the ball gets there. So a lot of the common injuries we're going to see in the upper extremities, such as thrower's elbow, rotator cuff dysfunctions, ulnar collateral ligament damage, is all going to be to the repetitive swinging and throwing motions that we're going to see a lot. And in the lower extremity, we can expect to see hamstring strains, as we do in any sport with high-speed running. We can expect to see ankle sprains from a lot of the sliding and diving movements. And then hip kinetic chain dysfunction. Anytime we have limited internal rotation at the hip when we're doing batting and throwing motions very often, can lead to problems up and down the chain. And then groin strains, which can probably be attributed to the frontal plane bias when we're moving. So to mitigate injury risk, we're going to be looking at a few things. First, scapulothoracic joint, shoulder joint, hip joint, our pillar, our core, and then our ankles as well. And we need to focus on these things in both the frontal and transverse plane, as this is how our sport is going to be played. So to do that, I'm giving a few examples of exercises that we're going to include to mitigate injury risk. First, I like closed chain movements for scapulothoracic strength, as I believe it gives us a lot of stability and we can really build that strength. For shoulder mobility and strength, I like more open chain movements, things like TRX face pulls, Y pulls. Gives us more freedom of motion, and we can really work on that mobility, as well as controlled articular rotations. For hips, we're doing a lot of single leg movements, a lot of adductor bias movements, such as Copenhagen planks, and then controlled articular rotations as well. For core stability and strength, we're going to be doing anti-rotation as well as rotational exercises. As first, we want to build that pillar of strength and then work on transmitting force through it. And then lastly, for ankle strength, we're going to be working things like single leg, bent knee, calf raises, and tib raises to strengthen the ankle. So general trends as the year progresses, there's going to be exceptions to these rules, but these are going to be generally what we see in my programming. Firstly, volume and time under tension is going to decrease as the year goes on. Time to apply force within a movement is going to decrease as the year goes on. Strength, we're going to start aiming for more absolute qualities and switch to more reactive. Plyometrics are going to start slow and extensive and move to fast and intensive. And then resistance emphasis, we're going to start with isometric, move to eccentric, and go to concentric. I like isometric first because I believe it allows us to slow down a little bit, lessen the load on the bar, reduce fatigue on the athlete so we can really groove those motor patterns in first before we go to heavy eccentrics, and then light concentrics to really focus on that power. So a full testing battery we're going to be doing at near the beginning as well as near the end of the off season. It's going to be broken into 2 days. The first day is going to be our neuromuscular power emphasis day. So 40-yard dash, pro agility, vertical jump, as well as a seated med ball throw. Then day 2 should be noted that won't be done back to back. We will have a rest day in between. Will be strength. So squat repetition maximum at 90%, a grip strength, which has a positive relationship to batting velocity as well as throwing velocity, and then a pull-up with max load. I like the pull-up versus a traditional bench press, as with the bench press, our scapulars are restricted on that bench, and I'd rather see full scapular winging as we do with the pull-up, so that's why I chose this test. Then readiness tests we're going to be doing in season to gauge athlete fatigue as well as performance measures. These are going to be done each week, and they're going to be built into the training day. So things like the 10-5 hop test, counter movement jump, which will already have baselines in, groin squeeze, which can be a really good indicator if we have a higher proclivity towards adductor strains and groin injuries. And then grip strength, again, we'll have a baseline for already. So now we get into some actual programming. We're going to start with 3 times a week using a tier system, which I'll explain in just a second. Our main goals are going to be hypertrophy and strength, so sticking around 65 to 85%. Really high volume here to start off. We're going to be working linear acceleration mechanics in our warm-ups, as well as some low amplitude plyometrics. And we're really going to be hammering isometrics and unilateral movements in this first 12 weeks. So with the tier system, basically all it is we have 3 main movements. That's going to be our leg movement, our push movement, and our pull movement. And each day we cycle through which is first. So day 1 is going to be our legs, day 2 is going to be our pull, day 3 is going to be our push. And then day 1 goes down to tier 3 and then up to tier 2. And we just cycle through that way. So our tier 1 is going to be our isometric movements, starting with those first. Then we're going to our single limb movements. And then it should be noted that our accessory work is always going to stay the same. It's going to be one of 6 categories: posterior chain, rotational core, anti-rotational core, shoulder or scap, lower body frontal plane movements, or arms. And these are just going to cycle throughout the entire year. They'll be thrown in at the end of the workout, and that's all that's going to be. So in the late off season, we're sticking with our tier system 3 times a week. Now we're focusing on more strength, so 85% and up, a little bit lower volume. And in our warm-ups now we're including lateral acceleration mechanics as well as some medium amplitude plyometrics. We're really hammering eccentrics and bilateral movements now in this 8-week block. So as you can see, our tier 1 is going to be our eccentric movements. All we've done is progress the exercise selection here. And again, accessory work is staying the same, one of those 6 categories. When we move to our preseason, now we're going down to 2 times a week. And now our primary focus is going to be strength and power. So we're looking at 90% and up. Really intense work, really low volume. Our warm-ups are going to have high intensity plyometrics as well as some linear sprints. And for our main movements, we're going to be doing contrast training as well as cluster sets in this 8-week block. So for our first 2 main movements on each day, we're going to do a heavier movement paired with a lighter, more powerful movement. So as you can see, we're adding in med ball throws as well as some jumps. And again, accessory work, one of the 6 categories we just cycle through. Lastly, competitive season. Again, 2 times a week. We're really going to be hammering on power and reactive strength now. We're sitting at around 60% as we really want the barbell velocity to be what we're looking for here. We want things to be light and punchy. Really low volume here, even less than in the preseason. And warm up, again, high intensity plyometrics, but now we're also including lateral sprints. We're going back to some isometric movements as we want to lessen the fatigue placed on our athletes in season. And we're also sprinkling in our weekly readiness test within the workouts in this 14-week block. So we had to be a little strategic here with when we're lifting, as most of the time we're going to see 2 games each week in Pesapallo. So our first lift is going to be a match day plus or minus 2, and our second lift is going to be a match day minus 1. The layout is really similar here. We've got a really powerful movement first paired with a lighter powerful movement, and then we're going to an isometric in the second movement, again paired with a powerful movement. And then as you can see here, we have our hop test, our counter movement jump, our grip test, and our groin squeeze built right into the training. We'll use these numbers again to monitor fatigue and athlete preparedness. And then accessory work, again, stays the same. And that concludes my presentation, and now I'd like to open it up to questions.
Question. With your testing battery that you have, based on the different players that make up a Pesapallo team, whether you're a batter, a hitter, or you just pitch, or anything like that, are there any tests that you might do with just one type of athlete in that group only, or would you do the tests for everyone?
It's a good question. Actually, with the sport of Pesapallo, as I didn't get to in explaining, but basically, a lot of the players are going to have the same roles. On the batting team specifically, everyone bats unless 3 outs are reached. And although the shortstops and fielders in the back are going to have slightly different roles, they all need explosive power characteristics. And all of them need to be able to bat, and all of them need to be able to throw. So in short, the only major difference might be the pitcher, but again, they still have to throw. So I think that all the tests will remain the same for everyone, no matter what.
In your in-season that you're talking about at the end there, with your match day plus or minus 2, and then your match day minus 1 sessions, can you just like go into a bit more detail about why a day might be a plus 2 or a minus 2 day? And I'm just wondering if that day happened to be a plus 2 day, and in another week it happened to be a minus 2 day, would that lift series change in any way, shape, or form?
No, I intentionally made them very similar so that they can be interchanged. And if schedule changes, because when I was researching this sport, a lot of times matches would be on very odd days. They might be on a Monday and a Thursday on one week. They might be on a Wednesday and a Friday, all over the place. So essentially, I wanted to make 2 lifts that had minimal fatigue, but really good power in them, power movements in them, so that I can change them out whenever need be.
So you're saying that in a competitive season, only one of these 2 lifts would happen per week?
No, we would still stick with the 2 lifts per week.
So you might have, with that Monday, Thursday example, you might have a game Monday, potentially an off day Tuesday, the minus 2 lift, then the minus 1 lift, then the game on Thursday or Friday or whatever.
Not exactly. So with the match day plus or minus 2, that would be if if we're doing. Sorry, could you repeat your question?
So I'm just trying to figure out when that first day, which says plus or minus 2, when that happens. Because let's say we have a game on, let's say Monday, Friday. Game happens Monday, game happens Friday. Monday you have a game. Presumably Tuesday might be an off day. Then Wednesday is technically 2 days before the next game. So do you do that minus 2 day lift on the Wednesday? Then you also do the minus 1 day lift on the Thursday. Then you play on Friday.
Okay, I see what you mean now. Yeah. So no, in that instance, it would be the Wednesday would be your plus or minus 2, and then Sunday would be your match day minus 1. So
Your minus is after the game.
yeah, well,
Minus 1 is after.
that was actually the example I would have used, the Monday and Friday. So this, it could be considered either plus or minus 2, as it's 2 days away from either competition. And then this one is directly before the second one.
For your weekly readiness tests, what kind of accommodations are you looking for, like for your athletes if if they don't perform well on the test? Or are you looking at specific percentages of a drop? Do you have any?
Are you asking how the test may inform my training decision, or if
Right,
I
yeah,
have?
you're doing the readiness tests and you got them listed there.
Mhm.
What would you see that would make you want to make a change?
So particularly like I'm looking for red flags if we see like significant drops, especially in like the groin squeeze or grip tests, then I know that like neuromuscularly that these athletes are fatigued. It's the same thing with the counter movement jump or the hop test. So we'll be collecting this data every single week. So I'll have a decent idea of where my athletes are at, and then using a Z-score to see if that they've dropped substantially. And if they have, then maybe we need to pull back a little bit with that particular athlete.